It's beer o'clock on Real Ale Craft Beer. Today we've got a beer from Buxton Brewery and it's a can of their Storm Shadow Imperial Stout coming in at 8.5% ABV in a 440 milliliter can. Really pleased to show you this beer today. I've been after this one a while. This one came out in April. It's now September. I chased around for a little bit when this beer first came out. I went to Tesco's 3 or 4 times, couldn't find it, kind of gave up on the whole idea. They brought out a double IPA and an Imperial Stout into Tesco's for £3.50 a can. I just couldn't find it. So the story goes, well, let me show you the pour first. Look at that! 2-finger tan coloured head. Jet black beer in the glass. Good levels of carbonation. That head is sticking around nicely. So going back to my story, the story goes that September 2020, Tesco bring out another range of craft beer, and I was determined, absolutely determined this time to get hold of these beers. So I went out a little bit further afield to pick up these beers, and when I did, I found 2 or 3 of the new beers out of something like 10, and this was sitting on the shelf. So I thought, finally, the Imperial Stout from Buxton Brewery. So I've been keeping an eye on some of the Instagram accounts out there, and there seems to be a lot of people grumbling at the moment that they just can't get hold of these Tesco beers, and I think they're right to grumble, if I'm completely honest, because they're being launched to such fanfare to people who are really, really excited for these beers on Instagram, mentioning no names, and then people are visiting their local Tesco's and they're not able to get the beers. I mean, what's the point? What's the point in raving about something that you can't get? Why don't the best thing Tesco could do is to make sure that these items are on the shelves and then start raving about them, rather than kind of drip feeding it and basically drumming up a load of disappointment that you can't get the beers. Because what will happen is that people will go, I can't be bothered. I'll just go somewhere else for my beer. I can't be bothered if they can't find the beer. I mean, look, I've waited 6 months. 6 months to get hold of this can of Buxton Brewery Storm Shadow Imperial Stout. And there was a big Instagram post back in April. This beer will be everywhere. You'll be able to find it. 6 months later, couldn't find it in my local Tesco in Barry, Penarth, or Culverhouse Cross, which incidentally is a Tesco Extra. Couldn't find the beer, it wasn't stocked. So they need to sort out either their distribution of this beer, or the beers that they keep launching, or gag the man on Instagram who fanfares these beers out of all proportion. Anyway, let's get with this beer. Let's concentrate on what we have at the moment. It looks good. I'm a big fan of Buxton beer. They should be able to brew an Imperial Stout by now, with working with Omnipolo for as long as they did. And it looks like that they can brew an Imperial Stout. It looks great. Let's get the aroma. Chocolate coffee caramel mixed with chocolate coffee caramel from the roasted malt, and the base beer smells like a dark mild. Let's dive in. Cheers. Too thin. Too thin. No wonder I couldn't get hold of this beer for so long. They were hiding it away from me. Don't send the new beer to that man, because he's just gonna call it an Imperial Dark Mild. My goodness me. They've got good head retention, really good head retention. They put a load of astringent bittering hops in there. Bittering hops and I reckon a little bit too much roasted malt. There's a little bit too much roasted malt in there for my liking. When you add too much roasted malt to a beer, because brewers only add a small amount of roasted malt to create colour, because if they put too much roasted malt in, it's an astringent bitterness. It's like adding, where you're meant to add 1 teaspoonful of coffee to your coffee in the morning, and you decide to add 4, and you're like, oh god, that's bitter. Ooh, you know, it's that similar, very similar situation where you roast malt, when it goes off to the roastings, and it's nice and golden when it turns up at the roastings, and they roast it and toast it until it's black and toasty and burnt. The reason why they do that is because it gives off flavours of chocolate and coffee and caramel, and of course it colours the beer. It colours the beer dark, black. I wanted to rave about this beer. But if you go back to the initial aroma when I put my nose into the beer, I just picked up straight away that it was dark mild. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with dark mild. I love a dark mild. If this was titled Imperial Dark Mild, I'd have no problem with this beer whatsoever. It's the fact that they've called it an Imperial Stout. They've priced it at £3.50. So another well-known supermarket, again, I'm not afraid to say, I'm an independent beer reviewer, I can say what I please. Another independent supermarket chain in Morrison's brought out very recently, as of just 2 weeks ago, an Imperial Stout by Northern Monk, which was probably the same ABV, 8.5% ABV, and it was £4 a can. It was called North Star, Northern Monk's North Star Imperial Stout. And I said in the review, this is the best stout, Imperial Stout, that you can get in a supermarket. And the reason for that was the price point. They had that extra 50 pence to play with per can, not per brew, per can. And that has given Northern Monk and Morrison's massive wriggle room to improve the beer, to give you a proper Imperial Stout. Tesco have basically gone to Buxton Brewery and said, can you produce an Imperial Stout that will hit the shelves for £3.50, and you must make the beer for £1 or £1.20 by the time taxes and Tesco take their share of the cost. It ends up being £3.50, but a ballpark figure of, can you produce a beer that sits on the shelf for £3.50? It's so tight, it's so tough. I'm not standing here for 1 minute. I'm not standing here 1 minute blaming Buxton Brewery here. I think the blame lays on the door of Tesco for for putting that price cap, that seal, that £3.50 for an Imperial Stout on the door of Buxton, and they've got their hands tied. They're sitting there thinking, we'd love to stick our beer in Tesco. It would do our brewery wonders, you know, in terms of sales and everything else. But how are we going to work with £3.50 a can for an Imperial Stout? Whereas over the road in Morrison's, they've gone £4. They understand it a little bit more. They've given the brewer a little bit more wiggle room in terms of adding more ingredients to the beer, more malt, more oats, more, you know, more body, a lot more body. This is a rather thin Imperial Stout, and it's worked. It's worked a treat, because I think the people who are going to buy this beer, the craft beer drinker, already understand that £4 is still incredibly good value for an Imperial Stout. This is a hands tied behind the back Imperial Stout at £3.50. That is thin. There's too much roasted malt to cover up maybe that thinness. And I expect if Jeff is the owner of Buxton Brewery is watching this, he's probably nodding his head. He's probably sitting there going, yeah. He'll never admit it. He'll never admit it to the world of beer, but he's probably sitting there going, yeah, I agree with this man totally. And that's the benefit of being independent. That's the benefit of me being an independent beer reviewer, where I can say what the hell I want. I can be as honest as I want. And I like that situation. I like being in that situation. I like educating the likes of Tesco in maybe saying, come on, give them a bit of wriggle room. Go to £4. Mark my words. Mark my words. In the next 6 months to a year, all of a sudden you'll see Tesco hitting the £4 mark when it comes to beer. You got to know what you're doing. In this industry, you've got to know what you're doing. Looks good. Looks good. But it's a dark mild. It's a dark mild at 8.5% ABV with a load of roasted malt chucked in for a nice astringent bitterness. Chocolate coffee caramel, way too thin, way too thin. And here's the description. A brooding heavyweight stout crammed with intense deep roasted malt. Oh, I'm going to start again. A brooding heavyweight stout crammed with intense deep roast speciality malts. Okay, whatever. Storm Shadow Imperial Stout, Buxton Brewery. Probably a shadow of its former self, because I believe that this was an Imperial Stout by Buxton before they stuck it into Tesco. For me, the winner of the Imperial Stouts from a supermarket, without a shadow of a doubt, is Morrison's. Get into Morrison's, pick up the North Star Imperial Stout by Northern Monk. It is terrific as of September 2020. If you're watching this beer review in September 2021 and you're holding the beer thinking, this is not how he described it, well, I reviewed the first batch of North Star Imperial Stout by Northern Monk. What am I saying? I don't know. Okay, rating for this Buxton Brewery Storm Shadow Imperial Stout. It's no more than a 6 out of 10. It's a 6 out of 10 from Real Ale Craft Beer. Please put your comments in the comments box. Subscribe to our daily beer and food reviews. Give us a big fat thumbs up. Boom! Cheers.